Hi, I'm Mike Coates. I've been a volunteer at the Old Lowlight Heritage Centre since it opened 6 years ago, where I've given various talks. Our Breaking Chains exhibition last year has received a Volunteers for Museum Learning award, and as part of the exhibition I gave a talk about John Foster Spence. So this is a short version of that talk. John Foster Spence was a prominent Quaker in North Shields and worked in what had been his father's drapery business in partnership with his younger brother Joseph. They managed an extensive business as drapers, tailors and general house furnishers in the imposing premises at the corner of Howard Street and Tyne Street. One of the best-known gentlemen of Tyneside, described as the grand old man of Shields, he spent up to 6 decades labouring earnestly in the interest of others. His father, Robert Spence, was born in Yorkshire, but in 1804 he came to North Shields to go into partnership with his cousin, Joseph Proctor, a Quaker, as a linen and woollen draper. Robert, a prominent Quaker, represented Shields at the Newcastle Quaker monthly meetings and was a trustee of the Quaker Meeting House and Burial Ground. Quakers had Christian roots and valued all people equally, lived simply, refused to participate in war or to swear oaths, were opposed to slavery, wore plain unadorned dress and married within the society. The Spence family were slavery abolitionists. In 1823, Robert went to London to present an anti-slavery petition to the House of Commons, and the Spence household gave sanctuary to an escaped slave from America. Robert, a most respected resident of North Shields, held many public offices and was very involved assisting the poor, and there is no doubt that John, the 7th of 18 children, admired and was much influenced by his father's character and associates, among whom were Thomas Bewick, the wood engraver, and William Wordsworth, who visited him in North Shields. John Foster Spence was born on the 8th of November 1818 at Howard Street and attended the Friends School in York. He left school aged 14 and soon after was secretary of the Natural History Society, then a flourishing body in North Shields. He was a very mischievous lad, telling tales and practical jokes with the greatest delight. Once he decorated a stuffed hen with various attachments, describing it as a rare Japanese bird. He showed it to the Natural History Society. In 1839, when aged 21, he went abroad for some weeks, visiting the Rhine and Switzerland. Aged 24, he married Elizabeth Corder, and they had 6 sons and 2 daughters. At the time of his marriage, he was still living as a woolen draper with his family, 2 cousins and 5 servants at Howard Street. When he was quite young, he showed an interest in public affairs. After the Lord of the Treasury empowered Customs House officers to clear vessels in 1833 without any reference to Newcastle, he was prominent in 1840 in the campaign to build a customs house at North Shields to free the port from Newcastle's control, which fellow North Shields campaigner Ralph Gardner had argued for 180 years earlier, requesting free trade on the Tyne. He was a supporter of the incorporation of Tynemouth as a borough and was prominent in the formation of the River Tyne Commission, in which he was a life member. When his father died in 1845, he and his brother Joseph inherited the drapery business, employing 23 men and boys, and in 1851 was still living at Howard Street. The business continued to grow and prosper despite the time spent on his civic duties, as illustrated by this advertisement in the Shields Daily Gazette of April 1878. This indeed may have been the first large department store in North Shields. By 1853 he had moved to Churton Cottage, which he had built where Ralph Gardner's cottage had stood. He laboured for years in the town's welfare, and in November 1854 he became a member of Tynemouth Corporation and served on the council until his death, with only a short break between 1867 and 1870. He was appointed a magistrate in 1860 and was elected mayor in 1861, then re-elected in 1891 and 1893. And in 1894, aged 76, he was rewarded for his lifetime devotion to the improvement of his town and fellow man with the freedom of the borough of Tynemouth. When Mr Gladstone, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, visited the north of England in 1862 and visited North Shields, Mr Spence, as acting mayor, was his host at a civic reception. Occupying the position of mayor 3 times in succession was a unique position, never having been achieved in 50 years previously, and when his brother retired from the council, he became chairman of the sanitary committee, a position he occupied until he retired from public duty. He took a great interest in the welfare of seafarers and was the first and only chairman of the Tyne Sailors' Homes from 1856, when the home on the new quay was presented to the town by the Duke of Northumberland. He was particularly interested in education and served 6 years on the school board as chairman and did a great deal towards the educational advancement of the town. He was appointed to represent Tynemouth on the Northumberland County Council and was instrumental in founding the local technical school in Tyne Street, and for years was secretary of the Royal Jubilee School and the governor of Kettlewell's Endowed Schools and the Union British Schools. On the 24th of November 1864, the steamship Stanley, in an easterly gale, was grounded on the rocks east of the Black Middens, 200 yards from the shore. Coastguards, the only men trained to undertake rescue work, used their rockets to get a line aboard and rescued 34 persons, but another 25 perished. Mr John Morrison, of the Army Volunteer Group at Tynemouth, suggested a similar group of volunteers for lifesaving should be established. He consulted Joseph and John Spence, and a public meeting was held on the 5th of December 1864, at which it was agreed to form a life brigade to assist the coastguards in an emergency. John Spence was appointed secretary and Joseph treasurer, and later a similar institution was formed at South Shields. It was recorded that from its inception until he died, John was always an active member, and when a ship's peril was sounded by the guns, he could be seen running all the way from his cottage at Churton to the Spanish battery, a distance of 2 miles. A crowd gathering at Tynemouth to watch the rescue, seeing a long, lanky figure running through the dark, would shout, "There gangs Spence the Quaker!" On stormy nights, he was at the battery point, clad in his oilskins, as active as the youngest member. Many times he was drenched with ice-cold water, but thanks to his splendid constitution, suffered no ill effects despite his age. A wooden brigade house was erected on the Spanish battery in 1865, replaced in 1887 by the present building, and was designed by Casimir Gomonsky, who is the borough treasurer at Tynemouth. The Spence brothers would have known both of these buildings, and the gentleman in this picture in the stovepipe hat in front of the original watchhouse is almost certainly John Foster Spence. This early photograph portrays John Foster Spence wearing his Tynemouth Volunteer Life Brigade belt and the Board of Trade issue crown armband, which denoted his rank as captain of the brigade. John invented a hawser cutter, which could be sent down the rope, which after being fired by rocket had become attached to a wreck. A cutting blade was deployed within the device, freeing the rope, enabling it to be pulled back and saved for future use. This picture shows a rocket being fired to the stricken ship, and after securing the rope, a breeches buoy could then be deployed. The wreck of the Diamante on the 26th of March 1898. No doubt John Foster Spence is assisting among the crowd on the foreshore in this picture. In 1878, the Duke of Northumberland offered land in Spittledean to the council to create a public park, and in November 1884, Alderman John Foster Spence saw this would provide desperate needed work for the unemployed, as well as providing a valuable amenity. He approached the Duke's agent, and the Duke renewed his offer and under the surveillance of Mr. Gomonsky, the borough surveyor, paths were created in the banks of the Power Burn, sycamore trees were planted, a lake was constructed, and a shelter park was created and completed in August 1885. A great asset for the residents of North Shields to the present day. John Foster Spence was connected with between 70 to 80 committees, and yet never seemed to suffer fatigue. He was prominently connected with all the undenominational philanthropic societies in the borough, including the Dorcas Society, the Indigent Sick Society, the Bible Society, the Dispensary, the Religious Tract Society, the Royal Humane Society, St John's Ambulance Association, the Literary and Philosophical Society. He was Honorary Secretary of Tynemouth Rowing Club and Secretary of the Northern Counties Blind Asylum in the town. He was a prominent member of the Newcastle Natural History Society and was a member of the committee which carried on the university extension movement in North Shields, and was also a member of the Board of Conservators for the Tyne Salmon Fishery District. He was also one of the founders of the Northumberland Coast Club and read many interesting papers containing valuable historic facts relating to the locality. His devotion to civic duties was reported in the Shields Daily Gazette of the 8th of October 1863, stating that in the previous year he had attended 94 out of a possible 115 council meetings. Yet on Easter Mondays, he still found time to entertain at his residence, Churton College, all the teachers and scholars of the Friends Sabbath School, and when he was chairman of the Tynemouth Poor Law Union, sitting on the board for 47 years, he was a familiar figure at the workhouse on Christmas Day, eating his Christmas dinner among the residents. He supported the scheme to demolish the Albion Hotel in 1884 and make Savile Street and Charlotte Street one continuous thoroughfare, effecting a much-needed public improvement. He was not what was expected from a typical Quaker. His dress particularly did not conform with that recognised as being orthodox for his sect, nor with normal attire. He was rarely seen without his top hat pushed well back, and from under it his abundant white locks strayed in disorder over the back of the collar of his black coat, which was always unbuttoned. His dark breeches, baggy at the knees, encased a pair of long legs, and his prodigious and never leisurely strides gained for him the nickname of the Ostrich, which was never uttered scoffingly, but in good-humoured acknowledgment of his amazing energy. He had been a Liberal in politics, but when the Liberal Unionist Party was formed in 1886 by a faction that broke away from the Liberal Party over the Home Rule question, he joined the party and gave several stirring speeches at their meetings. His strict Quaker upbringing relating to music may have mellowed, for although it is not known if he played a musical instrument, although a member of the Northumbrian Small Pipe Society, he gave a piano to the Tynemouth Volunteer Watchhouse for the duty crew's entertainment. However, an interesting entry in the Shields Daily News records when aged 69, after a musical lecture at the Albion Assembly Rooms, perhaps the most interesting feature of the evening was a song sung by Alderman John Foster Spence in a musical and sweet voice. His father, who did not even allow singing in the house, must have turned in his grave for his son not only singing in public, but doing an encore. A local newspaper recorded, "He was intensely single-minded, and intense simplicity characterised his whole life. The greatest moderation in food and drink, constant work till late at night and up early in the morning, and yet there was not a more truly happy man in the world, nor one who kept his youth more thoroughly. His intense enjoyment of any pleasure, such as a day in the country or a family gathering, was charming to see, and even at the time of his death, at nearly 83 years of age, his childlike, clear, merry blue eyes told of his healthy, happy life. No work was a trouble to him, and indeed if anybody suggested, "Will it trouble you too much, Mr. Spence?" he replied, "I do not know the meaning of that word." He retired as a draper in 1899 and died only 2 years later after 2 months' illness. The chief work of his life was the Volunteer Life Brigade, and with it his name will always be associated. And the last act on the morning of his death at 10:30 on the 22nd of July was to send out notices for a drill. The men met indeed on the day named, but it was to carry him to his last resting place, followed and mourned by thousands of those to whom he had helped and worked for during his long and useful life. The Shields Daily News reported he was the grand old man of Shields for whom the whole town mourned. Few men in the universe could show a record more brilliant with services to the community. For upwards of 6 decades he laboured earnestly and indefatigably in the interests of his fellows and did inestimable good in his day and generation. He was buried in Preston Cemetery in an unconsecrated grave with an entire absence of ceremony, in accordance with the religious observances of the Society of Friends. Still, it was impressive and the largest ever seen in the district. There was no hearse. The coffin, led by a contingent of Wellesley boys, was carried upon the Tynemouth Volunteer Life Brigade rocket carriage, drawn by 20 brigadesmen, followed by the boat's crews of the Tyne Lifeboat Institution, family mourners, 60 members of the Tynemouth Volunteer Life Brigade, representatives of Tynemouth Coast Guard and South Shields and Sunderland Life Brigades. The whole route to the ceremony was blocked by a dense mass of people who were deeply moved by the solemn occasion. During his life, a Tyne tugboat was named after him, and a lifeboat at Tynemouth was named and launched at the Long Sands by the wife of Captain Webb, the Channel swimmer. And today he is remembered by the school in Preston Village, which carries his name, and by his portrait hanging in the Tynemouth Volunteer Life Brigade headquarters. He was a man of exceptional capabilities who had concerned himself with the religious, social and political life of the town. He was indeed the grand old man of North Shields.